The lesson I learned was and by the way, I was in my 50s when this happened, right? I had been lying to myself for 50 years about this issue. The reality of it was I didn't have the right training. I didn't push it hard enough. I didn't work hard enough to get to where I needed to be. But here's the lesson. The lesson is, it dawned on me, what else have I been lying to myself about for 50 years?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Run with the Cheetahs, your climb to an extraordinary life, the podcast. This podcast is the companion podcast to the book by the same title, written by Mr. Jerry Freishtat, and we are very fortunate to have Jerry in here with us today. Jerry, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everybody. It's a great day over here at the Cheetah Factory.
Dude, it's going to be an amazing day today. When I've reviewed all this content we're going to cover today, we are loaded. I mean, we are absolutely loaded. And I don't mean anybody's drinking anything. We are just loaded with good stuff.
Exactly. We're going to pack it all in a short, 1 hour or so?
Well, I hope to keep it a little under that, but we'll see how it goes.
All right, here we go.
So the purpose of this podcast is to be able to expand on the amazing principles and guidance that's provided in the book, Run with the Cheetahs. I think if Jerry had to write that book again, it'd probably be about 1,700 pages. I mean, he hits everything really well, but there's so much more to be said. And that's what we're trying to do with the podcast. We see the opportunity. People are hungry for this content, and we're going to try and give it to them. And we hope you enjoy it. And I'll say right now, we have decided that we're going to establish a every 2-week interval for when these will air. So if you like what you're hearing, if you like what you're seeing, please kind of keep us in mind. Every 2 weeks, we're going to put up some fresh new stuff. Jerry, today, well, before we hit it hard, let's back up just a minute. In the past 2 previous episodes, we have been covering the dream stealers. And, everybody has dreams and goals and aspirations, and it's just really sad that we don't fulfill those. And Jerry's got a chapter in his book called The Dream Stealers. And he identifies in this chapter what the key dream stealers are. And the first one is drugs and alcohol. And we covered that in 2 episodes ago. And drugs and alcohol just have no place in the life of high achievers. They will hold you back, plain and simple, flat, period, end. Number 2 is bad habits. And boy, we dug in on this last episode, and it was really good. And number 3 is negative relationships, poor relationships, negative people. And that's also an ugly thing that can hold people back. The inverse of that, of course, is positive people and people that you should be around and improving your circle of influence. And that's also a very, very good thing. Jerry, I'm gonna look back to that just for a minute, because I had a little story happen this week that really resonates with that negative people, positive people thing. So, and you'll love this because we talk about this sort of thing. So, young man's in college. He's in his 2nd year of college. Now, this is a pretty sharp guy. He had a really good first year. But in his first year, he had I'll just say, a normal set of roommates. Your first year, normal set of college roommates. Goes in for his 2nd year, and in his 2nd year, he's got 2 roommates that are really into the gym. I mean, they're into working out and getting healthy, and he immediately picked up with these guys. And in the short time that school has started, he's already looking different, acting different, just because of his association with positive, healthful people that are helping him change his daily lifestyle. Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I'm sure his confidence level is soaring, and it gets back to things we've already talked about, that you become who you're around. I mean, it's plain and simple as that. You get around the right people right mindset, right attitude, that it will lift you, to places you never imagined.
Your mother was right. That's what she said. Be careful who you hang with, right?
There
All
you
right.
go.
Well, here's today. So we've saved number 4, which is the biggest dream stealer. We've saved it for this episode, and man, we got a lot to cover with this. But Jerry, why don't you tell us what is the biggest dream stealer?
Okay, Russell, by far the most impactful dream stealer is yourself. And I mean, most likely, you have evolved to become your worst dream stealer. And how that happens is it's the paralyzing effect, of who you think you are, which has been developed by lies others have told you for years. But even worse than that, you believed them, right? So you need to wake up, and very few people look in the mirror and like what they see. In order to live, an extraordinary life, you need to not only like yourself, you need to learn to love yourself.
Wow. Okay. That sounds like self-sabotage if we are our own worst enemy.
Well, it's a subconscious belief that gets embedded into our minds, from years and years of what you hear, what you see, what your environment is, and that develops an opinion about yourself, for which literally almost all of us, it's just not true.
All right, well, here's where we're going to start with this. We're going to start with, and we've talked about this a little bit before, and you know how uncomfortable I was with this at first, but you say you are exactly where you have chosen to be. And I think a lot of people will probably take my position on this and kind of recoil at that. But the more I've listened to you and the more I've tried to dig deep on this, it is oh so true. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that concept of you are where you've chosen to be?
Well, everybody is exactly where they choose to be because you are making your decisions about what you do on a daily basis. How you view things, and again, getting back to the first thing I just said, virtually all of that is input from outside sources, right? So you need to figure out a way to choose to be in a place that is internal to you, not the way other people influence or see the way that you should be. Um, and that whole concept is where the whole, victim mentality comes in. We become victims not because of things that we consciously choose to do. It's the subconscious things that other people that have implanted in us that make us feel like a victim every day and don't take accountability.
You have talked before about how accumulated choices, the accumulated choices we make just add up to bring us to where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, it based on, wrong beliefs about ourselves that's ingrained again in our subconscious minds, eventually that becomes your reality. I mean, Earl Nightingale, the famous guy from the 1950s, a lot of people listening to this might not know who Earl Nightingale is, but he was one of the pioneers of, self-development and motivational speaking. His most famous line is, we become what we think about. So again, if you're taking in input and it's programming your subconscious mind, eventually that is what you think about all day.
So if we finally can get comfortable, or not comfortable, but if we finally can accept the fact that we are where we've chosen to be, why do we work so hard to convince ourselves that's who we are and where we are?
Well, again, it comes down to accountability. I guess the best way to describe this is, we all hear that old thing about everybody wants money, okay, because they think it creates freedom, right? And it does create freedom in certain aspects, but true freedom, total freedom, comes from 100% accountability. So it's not about, the hand you were dealt, it's how you play the cards in your hand as you go through
Absolutely.
life. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Jerry, I'm going to actually pull up a graphic here for people to see. Uh, you and I won't see it at the moment, but they will. And if you're listening, I'm going to read it to you. The greatest trick you ever pulled was convincing yourself that you are not the problem. You are the problem, and you are also the solution. It's no one else's fault but yours. Ouch. I mean, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, everything about success in life it's somewhat counterintuitive, okay? Because the only path to success, and this is across the board, is the hard path. And we're wired for the comfortable path. So eh, getting educated and understanding that you'll have to move in that direction. And this is out of my book. Life's a battle. You need to learn to embrace it. Once you learn to love the battle, you'll learn to love the results. In order for you to change your approach, your input needs to change. The sourcing of where you're getting your information, what that information is, and how you're doing that programming, on a daily basis. Very few people, are willing to throw themselves into that arena of, fighting that battle on a daily basis. There's an old saying, comfort is a curse, and that's where we all want to be. And comfort is earned. It's not what you think it is. When I think about comfort and what I'm trying to achieve, I plan my comfort. Right? It's like literally a phase of the day, or a phase of time that I set aside for a week. This is my comfort time, whereas most people live in their comfort time. And
Sure.
that's the separation of climbing that ladder up to success. It's it gives you, when you take that approach of working for your comfort and planning the comfort, it gives you a sense of accomplishment and integrity and self-worth, that eventually makes you evolve into a well-rounded, quality human being.
Well, I know you have a whole lot more to say about comfort, and so we're going to
Right.
get to that here a little bit later. But
Yeah.
one of the subsets of you being your biggest enemy, or your what holds you back, is the lies that we tell ourselves. I mean, every one of us have lies that we tell ourselves. Sometimes we just call them excuses.
Yep.
I've got one working right now that I'll share with you, and then get you to comment on this. So
Yep.
I'm trying to build a new habit. And this new habit that I'm trying to build is
Okay. Can,
for
can, I- can I
after.
just stop? Can I just stop you right
Yeah.
there with one thing you just
Yes.
said? You said I'm trying.
Oh,
Okay. All right. We don't try things. We do things.
I
Okay.
love it, Jerry.
So right. Okay. So that verbiage, okay, is essentially saying I quit before I started because I'm trying, I'm not doing. You have to have a mindset of 100% commitment.
What about I'm working? Does that work? Or no, you say I'm doing. Like
Well,
I'm working on a new habit. Is that good
well,
or no?
yeah, but it just depends on where the definition of working came from. Is working evolving from a firm commitment of something that is a plan? It's specified. It's laid out. I'm doing this, and this, and there's nothing that's getting in the way of that. Then yes, I'm working on it.
Okay, well,
Right.
I'm building a new habit. I'm
Okay,
I'm
there you
building a
go.
new habit,
There you go.
okay?
All right.
And my new habit is something that has to happen after dinner at night. In other words, I'm trying to make better use of my evening hours. I've,
Right.
I've had dinner with my wife. We've enjoyed a nice dinner. We've chit chatted all this. She's got some things she wants to do. Now I'm building a habit of this is the time I want to work on my music.
Yep.
Now let me tell you, one of the challenges with this is that it takes a lot of creative oomph to work on the music. It's not a sit back and read and enjoy some quiet time. It's like, I mean, I have to gear up and get in there and work at it. So I find myself lying to myself a number of times, saying, not tonight. I'm going to get going on this tomorrow. And I think I'm going to do something tomorrow is probably one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves. I'm trying to break that. I'm trying to break it. I'm trying to forget. I'm building this new habit and I'm going
Yeah.
to do better with it in the future. But there's a
Right.
lie.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you just listen to the way you're saying that, there's not a commitment there. For example,
Okay.
for, let's just go to one that everybody can identify with. Go into the gym, right? Okay, so I'm a gym goer. I basically have been doing 7 days a week, going to the gym for years. Okay, the only time I will miss the gym is if I physically, for some reason, can't get there, or if I am physically, you know, unavailable to be there, like, so traveling or something like that, right? So now, are there days where I wake up and, oh man, don't feel good? I'm sore from yesterday or whatever. Yeah, there are. Okay. It doesn't matter, right? I go anyways. And you know what? There have been days over the years I've gone to the gym, gotten to the gym, got on the treadmill just to do like a 5-minute warm up and have left. Okay. But it's still a win because I kept my commitment. And the reason I had to leave was because of, there's certain levels of common sense of when you don't feel well or you're sick or things like that, that you have to weigh into everything in life. But I kept my commitment. So, for your example, every single night after dinner, I'd set a specific time, to be honest with you. This time I start. Some days you're going to sit down, Russell, you're going to feel creative. There's going to be something else that triggers, your mindset. Like, I listen to a lot of music when I'm exercising, and it completely puts me in a mental um, place different than I live during the day, right? Or what I'm thinking about all day. So you got to figure out what that is. But there will be days you get in there and the creative juices aren't there. There'll be days where, maybe you eat something bad at dinner, you got indigestion, you don't feel great, right? It doesn't matter. As long as you showed up and
Yeah.
you got started, then, some days are going to be great, some days aren't. I mean, it's no different than, an NFL quarterback, right? He's
Two
going.
thing
Yeah,
two
go ahead.
two things I've got to respond to that. First off, I love you calling me out on this. Okay, that's going to be just fantastic. Number two, um, so one of the approaches that I'm using to get myself in there is on some nights I feel great about this, and on those nights when I don't, I tell myself, "All right, you got to show up. Give it 10 minutes. Give
Yeah,
it
there
10
you go.
minutes."
Yep.
And I have seen that most of the time, those 10 minutes bloom. I mean, those 10 minutes bloom into an hour, hour and a half, and it's been fantastic. So I'm building that new habit. It's going to be a great habit for me because you know how much I want to work on my music. It's going to be a fantastic new habit, and I'm working hard on it. But that lie of, I don't feel like it, or I'll do it tomorrow. That's and just like you said about the gym, people who say or starting a new routine. I'm going to start my new diet on Monday.
Yep.
Start
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. What you described is basically, the success formula, because the important thing that you said is a lot of times once you get started, it kicks in. And that same exact thing with going to the gym. There's days you just, for whatever reason, you wake up, you don't feel good, something's wrong, but you get there and you might have the best workout you've ever had. You just don't know. That's why you always show up. And that showing up component, by the way, is the discipline of the commitment. Without the discipline of that commitment, you're gonna fall off that ladder at some point. You have
Dude,
to, got to show up.
those are tough words, buddy.
Yeah.
Discipline of commitment. Woo.
Yeah.
Well, so we've talked about lies, but the next thing, which is a little bit more serious, is limiting beliefs. And I don't know if you remember or not, but 2 episodes ago we had Cliff Brooks on, amazing personal trainer who's been doing it for 25 years, amazing looking guy, tremendous. I've suggested to everybody they start following him on Facebook and Instagram. He's really an inspiration to follow. But when we asked him what was it that he saw that held people back, I was expecting him to talk about drugs and alcohol. That was why he was there that day. But his first response was they don't believe in themselves.
Right.
And
Yep.
I was taken back by that, but that was, he says that people don't believe in themselves. So we've got this whole category of negative beliefs that people have about themselves, and maybe this is maybe this is the time for you to tell your cardio story. I mean, I love your cardio story.
Yeah. I mean, the limiting belief component, again, comes from everything we've talked about. It's the same, input and same thing. So, um, I'm gonna, this story is not, like this, grand, you know, story with some amazing conclusion, but what it did at the end was life changing for me. So let me just tell you this real quick. When I was a kid, I was always athletic, wanted to play all the sports, everything else. And however, I was, in football practice, the last guy finishing the laps. I remember when I went to camp, I signed up for wrestling, and the same thing. The coach took three or four of us out for a run. Halfway through the run, I'm walking. I literally had no cardio capacity as a young child, or I should say, I didn't have the genetic ability to just be a natural cardio athlete. So that had a big impact on me. From the time I was, I'm going to say 7 to 15 years old playing sports, and that left me with the view of myself that I can't do cardio. So years go by, and then as we talked about previously, got in my 20s, I became a real, gym guy and weightlifter and everything else. And periodically I would try, to get a little cardio in. Russell, I never ran a mile in my life, right? And when I went into the bodybuilding arena, for some reason, the cardio aspect of what was required to go through that, prep process and get on stage just didn't seem like it crossed my mind or wasn't that important to me. And when my coach told me how much cardio I had to do, I said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 David." I said, "Hey, I'm not a cardio guy." And as a matter of fact, I don't know why, but I literally, can't do cardio. I mean, 10 minutes, I'm, can't breathe. And he just laughed at me, of course, and he said, "Yeah, you're going to do it." And he put me on a slow ramp up program. And after the first couple weeks, and I'm doing 10 minutes on the stepper, and I'm like barely able to walk out of the gym. I'm huffing and puffing, and then he moves it to 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and next thing I know, I'm like 8 weeks in, and I'm getting about 30 minutes in, on the step mill machine, which is the go-to cardio machine in the bodybuilding world. And uh, there was one day that came along. It was probably at like 10 weeks. And I'm doing this 6 days a week. And all of a sudden, I'm at like 35 minutes and felt great and actually stepped up my steps per minute. The bottom line is that next thing I know, I'm 3 months into this thing. I'm like doing an hour of 700 calorie burn, which is a pretty quick pace on the step mill. And the lesson I learned was and by the way, I was in my 50s when this happened, right? I had been lying to myself for 50 years about this issue. The reality of it was I didn't have the right training. I didn't push it hard enough. I didn't work hard enough to get to where I needed to be. But here's the lesson. The lesson is it dawned on me, what else have I been lying to myself about for 50 years? And that question changed my life because every single thing that I made up about myself that, I wasn't good at this or I couldn't learn this, whatever it was, became, yes, I can. I just got to do, enough work and got to go through that battle process. So, that's, I would urge everybody to, there's a part of my book where I say you question everything. And that is one of the things you need to do about yourself is, when you draw a conclusion about yourself, ask yourself, well, why do I think that? What made me become so convinced that that's just, something about me, because it's probably not true.
Jerry, that is truly an amazing story, and I hope our listeners will really think about that. I think one of the really hard parts about what you're saying, though, is you say question everything. I don't think we're used to questioning our beliefs. And it's like, well, so where do I start with questioning my beliefs? Let me read to you, if I could, some of the common limiting beliefs, that people have, just in case this, rings a bell with people. I mean, one of the very most prominent ones is I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. A lot of people get that in their childhood. Number two, I don't deserve success or happiness. I don't deserve it. I mean, where in the world does that come from? But if you're carrying that with you, that's tough. I don't have enough time or money or resources. I work with a lot of young business people, and I hear that all the time. And one of my favorite responses to that is how resourceful entrepreneurs can be to get their businesses going. Number four, failure is bad, or I have to avoid mistakes. Well, you and we talk about failure all the time. And I mean, resilience is critical to succeeding. Uh, I'm too old or I'm too young. You were in your 50s when you started your bodybuilding thing. Amazing. Other people's opinions define me. Well, there's an awful lot of that going on. I just can't change, or this is just who I am. Ooh. I mean, listen, I've got some of these myself, and we're not going to get into them
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Yours was just so classic. And then the last one is success is only for others.
Yeah.
Boy, I mean, these are things people think.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. That to follow up on my story real quick, the thing that another just super impactful thing that happened to me when I was in college. I was never a good student. Always a battle for me, but I could not pass my calculus class, and I had to pass this entry level calculus class to get my degree in business, and that was something that, again, I made up about myself. I wasn't as smart as other people. Why am I like this? Nobody else seems to have this problem. And again, going back to what I learned about the cardio was thinking back on how hard it was for my brain to process math and calculus and things like that. At the time I just thought, this is me. I can't do it, blah, blah, blah. Right. Okay. The reality is that had I worked hard enough, had I got the fourth or fifth tutor, not just one or two tutors, had I had the right professor, someone I could go to and work on it, eventually, yes, I could have done it. Right. So again, that's the mindset I want people to try to tend toward, is to don't draw conclusions about yourself just because something didn't come natural to you. All right.
Oh,
It
that's
is,
good. That's good.
yeah, that's what we do. I mean, and by the way, that's how we kind of guide our lives, is because, oh, this didn't work. So I go over here. This didn't work. I go over here. It doesn't mean you can't do it. Okay. But, we do all have our own, you know, natural abilities and genetic makeup and things like that, which, is a factor in where we go in the path where we go in our lives. But don't draw negative conclusions about yourself just for something that didn't work or something that was hard.
So important. So we've
Yep.
talked about lies we tell ourselves. We've talked about limiting beliefs. I love this next one. Anyone that's ever had kids has heard, life's not fair.
Yep.
Life is not. Well, and the reality is, you're right. You're right. Life's not fair. But a lot of people still live with that mentality of life's not fair. How do you deal with that, Jerry?
Well, Russell, let me ask you this question. Is the world unfair?
Well, you and I have come to accept life as it is. I mean, that acceptance, I think, is the answer
Of
here.
course it's unfair. The randomness of things that can happen, which, come from various levels of different chaos, and a micro decision here can make a major factor in something that happens to you 5 years down the road. Random, things of, you know, crisis and euphoria, all these things happen. But here's the thing. If you know life is unfair, can there be anything unfair about it?
Uh,
Right?
I
If
understand
if
what you're
I
saying. Yeah.
if you accept that there's random things in life that are unfair, it's all about what you do and how you respond to
Yes.
unfairness. If you let me give you just a quick little example. My background in college, I played golf, and so let's just say you're in a tournament and you rip your drive down the middle of the fairway, 300 yards, man, beautiful. Everybody's like, oh my God, you walk out there and your ball is sitting in a 2-inch divot, right? Right in the middle of the fairway. Okay. Most people are like, oh, that's so unfair. I can't believe this happened, they don't even know how to approach the situation or anything else. A PGA Tour player has gone out and prepared for that situation 1,000 times. They've hit 500 balls from the front of the divot, from the back of the divot, right side, left side, deep, different depths of the divot. Okay, so it's all about how you prepare for the unfairness in life and how you handle it. And another factor in this part of this conversation is I want everybody to go back to something really bad that happened to you, something that's just random, totally unfair. You got screwed on something. Somebody did something really bad to you. You lost $1 million, whatever it might be. Was that all encompassing? Right? Did that end your life? Did it become something that just completely, you know, no, we move on, we learn to deal with it, and nothing is all encompassing, and no single defeat that happens to you is ever a final defeat.
Again, we are so fortunate, in my opinion, to be born in this country and live the lifestyle that we are able to live. I have someone in my personal universe. He's not a missionary, but he sure does act like one. He makes an annual trip over to Uganda, and turns out he's a photographer. So the pictures he sends back are just amazing. And that heading out to pick up water every day, and the primitive way, or at least by our standard of living, the primitive way those people are living. But those people are just as happy as they can be. And acceptance is really the first step of working with this life is unfair thing. And as you say, responding to it.
Right? Yeah. I mean, and the I think another good way to that's worked for me that I've developed over the years is that the best way to counter unfairness or random unfairness or random events and things like that is winning, right? So the more you win, we've said this before, confidence is simply the memory of winning. If you get small wins on a regular basis, those losses are just part of the game, right? Whereas if you're not winning and these losses come along, it has a way more deep impact on your subconscious mind and your future thoughts. But when you're focused on wins and you have a lot more wins than losses, you learn how to deal with those. And again, gets back to that total accountability thing.
And you talk about micro wins a lot too. I think that's a
Yep.
great term. Yeah.
Yeah, because your subconscious mind is 50 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts you had yesterday. So the only way you can change your outlook and how you feel about yourself and the person that you are is you have to change the subconscious mind, and you change the subconscious mind in short actions. It's something I call the focus 4 in my book. It's, what am I doing now? What am I doing a minute from now, 1 hour from now, and what did I do today? Right? You don't want to worry. You don't want to think about, what am I doing next month or next year? Everything is the input of your actions, short-term actions. So if you focus on short-term actions that yield short-term wins, you're programming repeatedly that positivity, and it's getting recorded into your brain, which is, the ultimate computer in the world.
Wow. Jerry, I made a mistake and left out something when we were talking about limiting beliefs. I want
Yep.
to go back on limiting beliefs just for a minute. I mentioned to you one time, I knew a young lady, this is in young adulthood. I knew a young lady who told me that growing up, her father specifically always told her that she would never amount to a piece of, you can fill in the blank.
Yep.
Now, first off, I had very supportive parents, so I can't even imagine one of my parents saying something like that to me. But when you have the limiting belief that says, I'm not good enough, where does that come from? From parents? I mean,
Yeah, it's 100. Nobody's born with a limiting belief, right? Okay, okay. It's all
that's
learned,
great.
Yeah, right. Okay, so let me give you an example of this accountability thing. Let's just take two kids from the same family, and in the family, the father was an abusive alcoholic. The kids used to see him beat his wife, and they grew up in just a terrible, terrible atmosphere. And one of the kids went on to build a massive business, got married, had four kids, was the one of the leaders at the church, doing all these wonderful things. And the other kid went the other path, ended up in jail, 30-year sentence. And they asked both the kids, why did you end up the way you ended up? And they both said, because I had an abusive alcoholic father. Right? So my point is that at some point in your life, when are you going to stand up and take accountability and not use the things that happened to you in the past as excuses? The stories of people that have been through the worst hell that went on to live the most incredible, beautiful lives are endless, right? And so at some point, and to me, it's very difficult. I'm not saying it's easy about this, but at some point when you're in your adulthood, you have to step back, look in that mirror, and say, all that shit that happened to me, none of it is going to affect where I'm going, what I'm doing, and the quality human being that I'm going to be.
I love every bit of that, Jerry. I love
Yeah.
every bit of that. Great, great analogy, great illustration. Wow. Let's move on.
Yep.
Let's move on. Here's another big one. Here's another big thing that holds people back. Fear. Fear. So, Jerry, do you have any fears right now? Do you have any fears?
Not too many fears. I think everybody has natural fears. I mean, there's fears that are real fears, and but 90% of what we fear is just simply misuse of our imagination, right? It's all the things that are unknown to us are things that we fear. So in order to eliminate that, you have to chop away at eliminating the unknown, right? The
Yeah.
only way to do that is face your fears.
Well, both you and I are business people, entrepreneurs. And I have worked with entrepreneurs for 40 years. And people say often that, oh, I could never be a business guy, or I could never be an entrepreneur. I could never start a business. I would be too afraid. And they
Yep.
think that entrepreneurs deal in this world of high risk all the time. And, I actually feel I have a different opinion of that. I think entrepreneurs understand that there's a risk, and they do everything they can to mitigate that risk. I mean, when I'm getting ready to do something risky, I just try and make sure that I've got my I's dotted and my T's crossed, and that I've kind of prepared contingency plans for what can happen here, and then try and take that step and move forward. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, it's again counterintuitive. The real risk in life is not taking the risk, right? I mean, you know what you got now, okay? And is that what you want? Because unless you go out there and make an effort, try and take a risk or do something, you're going to have the same thing you have now this week, next month, next year, and you're going to go to the grave with that, right? I'll tell you a quick story about this. My dad, um, when I was, my dad worked 2, 3 jobs to put food on the table. And when I was 12 years old, I have 2 older brothers. When I was 12 years old, he borrowed money, took everything he had, and bought a small business. And years later, I asked him, I said, Dad, how, with 3 kids, a mortgage, I said, how in the world did you have the gumption, the guts or whatever you want to call it to go do that? And he just looked at me and he said, Jerry, what was the alternative? And that's a question I want everybody to ask themselves. What's the alternative? Because if you don't go out and try to achieve things, build things, do things better, and this is across the board. I'm not just talking about money and business, your marriage, parenting. If
Yes.
you're not working at getting better at every one of those aspects, then you're going to just be a deteriorating sponge and things are not going to get better.
Yeah. I have a couple of fear stories, but I'll just share one of them. It is a business story. But as you know, back in the '80s, I started a small retail business, and yeah, it was a real tough decision to leave. I was doing really well at my full time job, but I wanted to go out on my own. I really did start small. This wasn't a go big or go home. I started very, very small, but that very small start was successful. Uh, my fear came when it looked like it was time to open up a second store. I had
Right.
opened one, I was doing real well. Well, when it was time to open that second store, now I started looking at some big time leases, big
Yep.
money leases.
Yep.
And I was terrified.
Oh
I
yeah.
was so comfortable in my little niche, my little nook that was running so well. I knew that signing this big lease, I was going to have to like triple my business, and it was going to have to go gangbusters. I was terrified. I did sign it. It did go gangbusters. And by the way, lease 3, 4, and 5 were a whole lot easier to sign. But that
Right.
number 2 was a real tough one.
Yeah. I mean, again, you have to when you're evaluating risk. One of the things I always do, I do this today with every investment I do. What's the downside? What's the worst possible thing that can happen? And even if that happens, it's not going to kill me, right? It's not the end. I can start over again. I've started over 3 times in my life. Been totally broke 3 times. Started completely over, and and you learn that again that without taking that risk, I would never ever reach the heights and the levels where I am. And another thing about this whole fear thing with related to risk is that if you take the risk or approach whatever you're fearful of and it doesn't go well, you're still better off than if you never approached it. You learn something, and by failing sometimes your self-esteem can actually go up. People think, "Oh, it's, devastating, blah, blah." You figured out what didn't work, and the second you know what doesn't work, you can move on to something that
No, I
potentially
get
could
that.
work, right? Yeah, okay.
I
And
absolutely get
uh,
that.
and it also develops your self concept. And just another quick story. My second oldest son, he was kind of a little bit like my prodigy, the wild man of the family. He
Uh,
was doing BMX riding and skateboarding, and he was really good. Started getting in some competitions, and he moved up to Moto X, with the jumps on motorcycles and stuff. And we went out to the local track one day. This was like a bigger track than he had been to, and we pull in. There's right in front of us. There's this big jump. I mean, I don't know what's considered big in that arena, but this was good 90 feet, right? And he just first thing we get there, he looks at that and he goes, "I'm doing that today."
oh,
And I yeah, and I was like, "Whoa!" I said, and my first thought is exactly what we're talking about here. How do you go do that the first time, right?
yeah.
And so, he takes a good 30 minutes, and just kind of like watching the old Evil Knievel things where you drive by it 20 times, get the speed, get the feel, and everything else. And he hit that jump, and I knew right away he overshot it, right? So he landed a little past the landing area, and he flew up off the bike, but he grabbed the handlebars and pulled it back down, and of course I was scared to death, right?
Oh, sure.
Now, right. But what do you think a moment like that does, for your confidence, for your self esteem? And what if he would have got there and not done it? Right. So, and again, let's look at the downside. What's the downside? Major accident, broken bone, potential injury, things like that. But that's what life is, right? If you're not willing to put yourself out there, there's no glory.
But also the guys that are in that sport, they kinda expect some broken bones along the way.
Yeah, I
Don't
mean,
they? I mean,
yeah, it,
no, or excuse me, how about we just say bruising?
yeah,
They
right.
expect some aches and pains along the way.
Yeah, it's a little different today because now they have all these elaborate practice facilities with foam pits and nets
Okay.
and all that. Back then it was like, get out and do it, right? So it's a little bit different. But again, I'm just telling that story because now he's in his 30s, but I can guarantee you that launched him to a whole different level in life, whole different
Yeah.
level. And when you hit these levels, because you take risk and you face fears, you do not go back down. You're at a new level, right? And
Yeah.
you take that to the grave.
Level up.
There
Level
you
up. I
go.
love that expression, level up.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I want to talk about something that never made any sense to me for a long time, but I've begun to understand it a little bit better, and that is the fear of success. Now, the
Yep.
term fear of success to me, I mean, I'm thinking, who can possibly be afraid of success? Isn't that what we all want? But it is a very real thing. And I've got a couple of notes here about how people can be. Oh, you're smiling. You
I-
must have something.
no, because this one this is an easy one.
Oh, tell me.
Along along with success comes responsibility. That's why people
Okay.
fear it. They fear, oh, now that I did this, whoa, now I got to take care of this, and this. And that is um, what I describe as, you can have good problems or you can have bad problems, but you're going to have problems in life, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have success, you're going to be dealing with bad problems all the time. Not enough money, bad relationships, poor health, all those things. And if you are extremely successful, yeah, you're going to have a whole different level of responsibility to deal with. And it's so funny because I'm in this investment group, like these 400 guys, all super wealthy guys, and and it's just incredible when I listen to listen
Oh, yeah.
to some of the especially the last couple of years with interest rates going up and what happened to a lot of multifamily real estate. People lost entire complexes and things like that. Say, That's a good problem, right? That's a
Yeah.
good problem. I tell people I've lost $1 million 3 times in my life, and I tell people I had the opportunity to
Yeah.
lose $1 million 3 times. Wouldn't you want to have the $1 million to lose? It's all
Yes.
your perspective. So along
Absolutely.
with success comes responsibility, and that's where people have a tendency to want to back off because they don't want to be responsible for handling the success.
Well, there's another factor there too, and that is that collateral damage. And what I mean by collateral damage is, let's just say you are a bagger at the grocery store. I know you did
Hmm.
that one time.
Yep.
And you got your other baggers, so you got your boys, all the baggers. They take
Yep.
their breaks and they go outside for a smoke.
Yep.
I mean, that's kind of, but you got one guy that says, yeah, instead of my break going outside, I'm going to go over to the manager's pit there and just see if they need any help. And
Yep.
before you know it, this guy is associating with that assistant manager group of people, not his boys, and it can be a little uncomfortable. Well, that story plays itself out time and time and time again. When you succeed, sometimes you find you're leaving some of the people that you've been with behind, or some of the situations, some of the relationships, and it can be a little uncomfortable for people.
Yeah. I mean, it's I have a thing called friends versus allies. Your friends really don't want you to move up, be happy, succeed, because there's a good chance you're not going to be friends anymore, right? And it's not from a bad place that they're doing that. It's because they care about you, and like family members love you and things like that. But when you're moving up, you're going to leave some, like you call it, collateral damage behind. I mean, that is
Yeah.
it, and you'll move into a new group
Yeah.
of like-minded people, and people that want to see you succeed. I call allies, and that's who you want to associate with.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to the last one. And of course, I know you can go off on this, so I'm prepared. But comfort zone, comfort zone. Jerry, I got to be honest with you, man. That comfort zone just feels so good. comfort zone, comfort zone is that's nice that you can play in your comfort zone, like, or your comfort area. I think people just really enjoy their comfort zone, and they don't want those uncomfortable feelings of change. So a comfort zone can really hold us back, can it not?
Comfort zone means that you're playing neutral, and neutral's a losing game. I mean, it's literally the decay of one's being. It can cause a slow downward spiral of your marriage, your finances, your health. All your dreams, goals, visions need to keep expanding all the way to the grave. And if you're not doing that, you're heading downhill. We don't really ever. I like to think of never arriving at success. I call success a daily injection of growth. If
Hmm.
if you're if you're not growing, you're not successful. And it also, by doing that, it keeps you relevant. And here's one that's kind of you don't hear very often. It keeps you attractive. The law of attraction is so critical as you age and get older. And when I say attraction, I'm talking about your how you look. I'm talking about how you make people feel, and people how people view you. A lot of your self-esteem has to do with that. So if you're constantly doing new things, growing, learning new stuff, getting new associations, rising up to what I said a minute ago, a group of allies that are aligned with your dreams, goals, and visions, um, that will attract the right people, and probably nothing's more important than your marriage in this category. I mean, you know, I don't know how good my marriage can get. All I know is it gets better every year, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
And that's by design.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, I'll tell you what, comfort zone, that comfort zone is, what did you say? What word was it? Comfort is atrophy. Did you say atrophy or
No, the decay of one's being.
decay? Oh,
Right. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
Boy,
Yeah.
that's strong. Comfort
Yep.
is decay. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Well, Jerry,
Yeah.
we've hit a bunch, and we're coming up on our hour. So, I'd love to keep this just under an hour if we can. I think we've
Sure.
covered most of this stuff. The bottom line is, you are often your own worst enemy for growth, and we've got to go back to our old friend self-awareness and start questioning, as you say, some of the things we tell ourselves about our capabilities, about our lives, about our comfort zone, about our limiting beliefs. We've really got to challenge these. And self-awareness, it's tough. You got to ask yourself and really question where some of this comes from and how do you move forward. Do you have anything you'd like to say here as we wrap up?
Well, just, something you mentioned earlier about how do you become self-aware? Like, how do you question everything? How do you, I always like to describe it as, I'm sitting here, but the other me is sitting over there, and the other me is looking at me, and questioning, what do you see? So I like to do that. I think a good tip to help people get through this process of questioning a lot of things is become a great observer. Okay. Everybody like wonders about, this person and that person, how are they so successful? The old term, everything he does touches to gold, turns to gold, that type of stuff. Start observing what other people are doing that you admire, and then question yourself. Wait a second, I don't do that. What are the and by the way, a lot of these things are small detail things. I like to pay attention to details of super successful people. Little things. What time do they get up? What's their routine during the day? What is their process? And if you do that, you will find, here's the beauty of this. You will find commonality from all the most successful people are doing very similar, same things. Maybe different avenues, different careers, different paths, but the core basis of what they do is all very similar. So just pay attention to that, and then it makes it easy for you to question everything.
Jerry, that's fantastic. Thank you very, very much. Well,
Yep.
listen, this is going to wrap up our 3 episodes on the Dream Stealers, but I think that that's important stuff. People always wonder, how come I can't succeed in this? Why can I not do this? And I think we've covered this Dream Stealer session pretty good. Well, we're going to be back in 2 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, and we really thank you for joining us. We encourage you to send us your comments, your thoughts, any thing you might be thinking about your fears or what might be holding you back, or success stories you have to share. Please put them in the comments, send them to us. We'd love to see them. We'd love to hear them. And we thank you very much for joining us. Jerry, it's an honor and a privilege to have you to bounce all this stuff off of. I admire so much of what you've done and what you're still doing today. And I really appreciate you calling me out on my attempt to build a new habit. So thank you very, very much for that. And I'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks.